Today we are going to talk about why you get the "I need to think about it" objection and how to fix it. Right? I listen to thousands and thousands of calls, and usually it's the same type of things that are triggering it. So hopefully you guys can hear it. I'm going to jump right in right now. Let's see here. Switch to my iPad. All right. So let's see, why do we get the think about it objection? Well, the first thing is you're really getting like surface level answers, right? So you're basically just staying on the surface. If I put surface level answers, okay? So like, why do you get those? Well, there's a couple of reasons, right? One of them is you're kind of unconsciously, you're creating resistance in people, right? So it would be, put resistance, resist. And how do you do that? You do it with questions, right? There's several things. One of the biggest things that I hear people doing is they try to force pain, right? Because everyone talks about, you got to get to the pain. If they don't feel the pain, they're not going to, change. And there's truth to that, right? But when you try to force pain, people aren't stupid. They know what you're doing, and it doesn't feel good, and their wall comes up. And when their wall comes up, you get surface level answers. And you can even be, at that point, it's almost too late. Even if you're really good at asking questions, you can break that down. But it's hard once the wall comes up. They're in protection mode, self-preservation. This person is trying to make me feel bad that they're doing it because they unconsciously, that people are thinking they want my money. They might not even consciously be thinking that, right? So when you force pain, when you try to say, I'll give you an example. Like one thing I hear is people will they'll ask a question like what's the worst part about something, which is not a bad question in and of itself, right? But they'll say, is it A or is it more like B, right? And I hate these type of questions, right? Why? Why do you think these questions are bad? Well, one, it might not be A or B, it might be C or D or E, right? And so that's one thing. And two, even if it is A or B, right? What's more powerful? If you say, is it this or is it this? And I say, oh, it's definitely that. What kind of emotion, what kind of thing is that? For me, it's nothing. Oh yeah, it's horrible. But people will say that, oh, it's the worst thing in the world. And they're not even, there's no emotion behind it, right? It's just on the surface. Oh, if I don't change, that'd be horrible. Right? So giving them a choice of things is never a good thing. Okay, right? And another thing too is sometimes the questions are just asked too fast. And if you, believe it or not, when you want to get a deep answer, the slower you go, the more methodical and more like you're thinking of the question, the more thoughtful of an answer they'll give you, right? So if you say, what's the worst thing about XYZ? Right? They might say, oh, it's just horrible. It's just really bad, right? Or you could say something like, they tell you something that's bad and say, okay, but how is that affecting you personally? Right? It's different. It's slower, it's more methodical. You're going to get a better quality answer by asking a question like that. Okay? So that's the first problem why you get the I want to think about it. It's because there's no real consequences for them. There's no realization of what's really going on, right? Because what they think the problem is and what the real problem is not the same thing. Almost never is, right? They think the problem is this, and that is just a symptom of the bigger, deeper problem that you need to uncover. Because if they're not saying, oh my goodness, holy cow, I never thought of it that way. Oh my, that's right, that is it. Then it's going to be really hard to get them to shift, right? Now, granted, these calls shouldn't be fun for them, but it should be a level of awareness that they gain from you asking the right questions, right? So that's the first thing, is getting the surface level thing. The second thing that I notice a lot, it's really bothers me hearing calls like this, is the coaches they're needy, right? And the reason why they're needy is they're seeking, or they're rapport seeking, or they're seeking rapport, which is really, really bad. It's really bad framing. It's just bad. It feels bad for the other person. And it stems from needing to be liked. It stems from needing the sale, and they think that's how they're going to get it. If they like me, then they'll buy from me. Where them liking you and buying from you are two different things. They could love you. It could be the best person in the world, right? They're not going to give you any money. Why? Well, because they don't trust that you're going to help them give them the answer, right? So how do you know if you're being needy or rapport seeking, right? Well, one of the things that I hear people doing is they just laughing at the other people's jokes, or actually even inappropriate times. Like, one thing that clients do when they say something, it's really interesting. It triggers me like crazy. They'll say something that's really bad, and then they laugh. And then the coach laughs because they're nervous. And it's like a nervous laugh, right? So when someone says something to you, it's like a really bad thing, and then they laughed after it. Maybe one time let it slide, but if it happens, if it's a pattern, you need to call that out. Ask them, this is the second time that you said something that was really bad, and then you laughed right after it. What's that about? Or why is that funny? Right? And I would just, that's a part where because on the call, you need to have these things where you challenge them, right? It's not like butting heads, right? You never want to do that, but you need to challenge the limiting beliefs, because, they say in the calls, you shouldn't coach on the calls. And I agree that you shouldn't coach on the calls of why they're coming to you to help them, not on that topic, but you need to coach them on the calls, because if you can't get them to, most of them have like big mindset blocks. They have big issues around money, about investing, about worthiness, all these things. And if you don't address those issues and coach them through that, they're never going to pay for it. They're never going to have the strength to pay for it, right? Okay, so don't laugh at their jokes. I mean, if it's funny, laugh, but like even that, like I would keep that to a minimum, right? And another thing is feeling the need to speak, right? To fill in the space, for the awkward silence, right? When there's silence, it's almost like I've heard coaches ask a great question, and the other person is not answering, but they're thinking, right? And they're going through the motions, and then the coach just says something and lets them off the hook. And I'm like, oh, you just ruined it. You just planted this beautiful thing. They're making this picture in their head right now, and you just talked over it and just canceled it out, right? All right, so feeling the need to speak at the silence, right? Another thing that will happen when it comes across needy is when they say something like a limiting belief, right? Or some kind of BS, I call it BS, right? But it could be a limiting belief, limiting beliefs. It could be mindset issues, right? Which is similar. Mindset issues. It could be something also incongruency, right? This happens a lot on the calls. They'll mention one thing on the call, like, how bad it is and all these things, right? And then 5-10 minutes later, they'll say, it's not that bad. And it's like, you don't say anything about it. Like, you're like, wait a minute, you just get done telling me X, Y, and Z, right? How is that not that bad? Right? Or what has changed since you told me X, Y, and Z? Make them realize that they're just bullshitting themselves, right? Do you see that? Do you see what you're doing there? This is a pattern. And I would call it out. And then like, oh my God. And that's how you get rapport with people, when you get to the real truth of things and they realize, holy cow, you're right. And another thing that happens when you're rapport seeking is you have a really weak frame and weak framing throughout the call. And people buy your certainty, right? You have to have enough certainty for you and enough certainty for them to carry them. They can borrow your certainty, right? In fact, they need to, most of them, because they've had so many times of struggling and all these problems, especially if it's something like big. Like I've worked with a couple clients that had, that helped with like anxiety issues, crippling anxiety where people can't leave the house, right? How are they can't make decisions on what to do during the day. How are they going to make a decision to invest? So you really have to have so much certainty that they can borrow it, right? If you have this is what happens when people say, "Oh, I don't think that my program's going to get them the results," and then the self-doubt comes in, and charging too much money, and it's just like it's a shit show, and it's almost impossible to enroll somebody if you don't have that absolute certainty, right? And, I always say that the confidence comes from competence, right? So when you know what you're doing wrong in the calls, and you practice it, you role play and train it, fixes it. So how long are we in this? I'm going to go over what to do now. Oh, geez, I got to figure out how to do the shorter ones. But anyway, so let's do this now. What can you do about it? Like, how do you fix it? Well, the first thing you have to do, and they say in sales, is telling's not selling, right? So don't tell them things. I hear people telling them all the things instead of, So first thing you got to do is you got to turn your statements. Jeepers. Into what? Yep. Questions. That's a big one. If you just do that, if you turn your statements of telling them what's going on and you turn it into a question, and you're going to get better at asking questions, right? If you're not getting the answers you want, then ask better questions. If you're getting surface level answers, you're probably doing surface level questions. So the key to the pain is to get specific. Don't let vagueness and don't let that slide, right? And then 2, this is a big one too. Like, be more neutral with your questions, right? As far as the tone, right? Like, I hear people saying like, oh my God, like, that's so bad, right? And they're like, oh, so like, just be neutral. Like, when you ask a question, like, okay, gotcha. Right? Let's say an answer. Don't try to feed into it. Don't try to force pain. Don't try to downplay it. Some people downplay. Oh, it's not that bad. We'll help you. Okay, gotcha. No calls in the last 6 months. Gotcha. Boom. Like, neutral, right? Number 3 is this is the one that is this is the silent killer. Don't try to force pain. Don't force pain. Right? Get specific. Let them tell, but don't try to force pain. They sense it. Number 4, don't try to get them to like you. Let me see. Try to get them to like you. Don't stop seeking rapport, right? You have to believe in your mind that there's billions of people on the planet, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that could be your client, and there's only one of you, right? Get out of this scarcity mindset, right? This is the thing the coaches bring to the call. Their mindset's really screwed up, and most people's are, right? I mean, we all have to work on it at some level, right? All right, so number 5, we talked about this earlier, but slow down when you're asking deep questions, asking questions. Jeepers creepers. You think English was my second language. Slow down, pause. Even if you know what you're going to ask, how does that affect you personally, right? Or how has that been affecting your self-confidence, right? Or has it started to affect your self-confidence yet? Whatever, right? Okay, number 6. This is a big one. This will help a lot of the neediness issues. Is be outcome jeepers independent. Don't need the sale. Let me see. Independent. Okay. If you need the sale, you're already needy. So you're going to bring that energy to the call. You're going to bring all that, and people sense it. It's gross. It's gross. And the last one I got for you today, this is the biggest one, right? This is why most people are coaches, but this is the biggest lie that they tell themselves, right? Is you need to care more about other people, care more about others on the call, right? Care more about others than your need to be liked. And this is important, your need Oops. To be, this is the worst word of them all. My God, you ready? Comfortable. All right. When I hear people like, why didn't you call them out there? Why didn't you say something? That's a big thing. And they're like, well, I didn't want to blow the sale. Right. Or I didn't want to do this and this. And it's like, okay, so this person talked about committing suicide, and your need to feel comfortable, to not have that friction of challenging them apart, is more important than helping them to survive and live. Right. It's like, that's a big deal. Right. I always say that's the most selfish thing you can do, is be nice and let them off the hook. Let them go away when you know they're not going to do anything about it and they're going to suffer. Right. The best salespeople have a deep caring about the other people, more than anything, more than the sale, more than any kind of money, more than any needing to be liked, right? And if you're not willing to blow up the call to get them to shift to change, then you don't care enough. Don't stop lying to yourself, right? That's one of the things. I've had a couple calls where I blew up the whole call, but they had a shift after, and they reached back out to me after and said, you know what? I want to thank you for telling me the truth. Everyone else was blowing smoke, but you were the only one that told me the truth. And they never worked with me. It's okay. If I get off the phone and if I spoke my truth and I said everything that I feel that they needed to hear so they can have that shift, whether it's they go down the street and buy from someone else, that's okay. That's how we do our job. Anyway, any other questions or topics you want me to do? And I'm going to have to get these shorter, 17 minutes. But you know what? If you're serious and you want to get better, listen to it. If you're not, then don't. Anyways, have a good one, freaks, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.